The humid air of New Guinea clings to every surface, thick with the smell of aviation fuel, hot metal, and the endless hum of life on an airfield. At 7:42 a.m. on August 17th, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched under the gleaming wing of a P-38 Lightning at Doadorura Airfield. His hands, streaked with grease and oil, tightened bolts, adjusted panels, checked lines, every movement methodical, deliberate. Today, however, his mind was elsewhere, above the roar of pre-flight engines, above the chatter of the squadron, above even the nervous laughter of young pilots. McKenna felt the weight of inevitability. Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 23 years old, a farm kid from Iowa, was climbing into the cockpit. 6 missions, 0 kills. And today, like countless others before him, he would fly straight into death if nothing changed. The Japanese had dispatched 18 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. Agile, deadly, and perfectly trained to exploit the P-38's single, fatal weakness: inability to match the Zero in a turning fight. The P-38 Lightning was a marvel of American engineering. Twin engines, twin booms, a sleek fuselage built for speed and firepower. At high altitude, it was unstoppable. But in a dogfight, against a Zero, it could be a coffin. Its controls carried a fraction of slack, a few millimeters of delay in the aileron system. Enough to make the difference between life and death. For every pilot who survived a dogfight, another fell victim to a delay no manual could teach them to overcome. McKenna had watched 17 pilots die in just over a month. Good men. Boys, really. They climbed into their P-38s with confidence, their eyes full of dreams, and returned in boxes or not at all. The manuals blamed pilot error. The instructors said the pilots had not followed doctrine, but McKenna knew better. It wasn't their error. It was the aircraft. The aileron control cables of the P-38 ran from the cockpit through the twin booms, forward to the wings, passing over pulleys that introduced a tiny, nearly imperceptible slack. At high speed, it barely mattered. But in the twisting, deadly ballet of a dogfight with a Zero, that fraction of a second delay spelled disaster. 3 weeks earlier, Lieutenant David Chen had nearly died because of it. A P-38 veteran in name only, he'd flown a mere 3 weeks in theatre. The Zero had cut inside his turn. Chen had tried every maneuver the manual recommended: roll, dive, climb. But the aircraft lagged behind his commands. Only his wingman's gunfire had saved him. When Chen returned to the depot, the repairs didn't mention slack in the cables. Only after a later mission would fate catch up with him. Captain William Morrison, an ace with 11 kills, met the same fate. Experienced, cunning, smart, Morrison flew with the wisdom of countless engagements, but even he could not overcome the subtle delay in the controls. Over Oro Bay on August 3rd, 1943, his P-38 felt mushy during a split S maneuver. The Zeros stayed with him like shadows. Morrison did not return. And so it went, day after day. The smell of aviation fuel, the metallic tang of heated oil, the constant hum of propellers spinning. Each morning a reminder that the airfield was both a crucible and a graveyard. McKenna saw it all. Each log he signed, each engine he inspected, each aileron he tested became a silent witness to lives hanging by a fraction of an inch. By August the 16th, 1943, Hayes had come to McKenna with desperation in his eyes. "Can you make it roll faster?" he asked. Anything. I don't care if it's against the rules. I just need a chance. That night, under the dim light of a single bulb in the maintenance hangar, McKenna worked. The air was thick. Silent but for the distant whir of generators and the incessant buzz of tropical insects. Sweat ran down his back. Grease caked his hands. And in his tool bag, the single piece of high-tensile piano wire awaited, salvaged from a P-38 that had ground-looped weeks earlier. 8 minutes, one Z-shaped modification, a simple tensioner that removed the slack from Hayes's left aileron cable. Officially forbidden, unapproved, dangerous if discovered. But the P-38 responded instantly the next morning. At 7:42 a.m., Hayes took off. By 8:14 a.m., his element intercepted 18 Zeros at 13,000 feet over the Juan Gulf. The sun behind them, perfect for a diving attack. Hayes picked a Zero, dove, built speed. The aircraft rolled instantly without lag. In 30 seconds, he had 3 kills. His P-38 moved like a fighter, not the lumbering truck it had been. Other pilots noticed. Captain Frank Mitchell, watching from 15,000 feet, saw the impossible. A P-38 snapping into turns faster than it should, responding to commands like lightning, obeying a master's call. McKenna's modification spread like wildfire. Quietly, whisper to whisper, mechanic to pilot. By September, 40 P-38s had the tensioner. Kill ratios shifted. American pilots survived. Japanese aces like Saburo Sakai, 64 kills, were stunned. Their timing, perfected over years, no longer worked. The hunter became the hunted. By mid-August 1943, the airfields of New Guinea were buzzing with an unspoken excitement. Whispers of McKenna's piano wire modification had spread quietly among the P-38 mechanics and pilots. What began as a desperate, unauthorized attempt to save Lieutenant Hayes had evolved into a transformative tool for survival. Captain Frank Mitchell, after witnessing Hayes's performance firsthand, insisted his P-38 be modified as well. Soon, the request spread. Pilots were asking their crew chiefs. Mechanics were improvising on their own. No official documentation. No formal engineering approval. Just trust, intuition, and the quiet understanding that in war, survival sometimes depends on bending the rules. Lieutenant James Watkins, crew chief with the 49th Fighter Group at Guisap, received word of the modification from a pilot transferring from Doadorura. Skeptical at first, Watkins hesitated. But after one test flight, the results spoke for themselves. An airman returned with his first kill after 8 weeks of combat. The P-38's lag-free roll allowed pilots to match and, in some cases, outmaneuver the agile Zeros. Within weeks, nearly 40 aircraft had undergone the modification. Squadron after squadron began to report better survival rates. Losses that had once been a near constant in July, 2 P-38s lost for every Zero destroyed, began to reverse. By August, the ratio was 1.3 to 1. By September, it was nearly even. War is often thought of in grand strategies, massive battles, and technological marvels. But sometimes the smallest, almost invisible changes make the greatest difference. A 6-inch piece of piano wire, bent into a Z shape, altered the course of air combat in the Southwest Pacific. Lives were saved. Pilots regained confidence. Doctrine met reality, and for the first time, it could survive it. The Japanese aces noticed the change almost immediately. Pilots trained to exploit the P-38's control lag suddenly found their precision misjudged. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, one of the Empire's most feared aces with 64 confirmed kills, experienced it firsthand on September 3rd, 1943. In a maneuver he had executed flawlessly dozens of times, he tried to cut inside the Americans' turn. The P-38 responded instantly. Sakai barely avoided collision, his timing shattered. Other experienced Japanese pilots reported similar encounters. Tactics that had worked for years, turning fights that capitalized on the P-38's slow response, were failing. The enemy didn't understand what had changed. They had no visible clue. The P-38 looked identical to the aircraft they had been fighting since the beginning of the Pacific War. The engines, the guns, the airframe, all the same. What they couldn't see was hidden inside the twin booms. A simple tensioner that made the aircraft feel alive in ways Japanese pilots had never encountered. By late September, the effect on combat was unmistakable. The 11th Air Fleet had lost 38 fighters to P-38s in a month. American losses were down to 22 aircraft. Orders from Japanese command grew cautious. Pilots were instructed to avoid engaging P-38s unless they had a significant numerical advantage. For the first time in the Pacific War, the Zero, the symbol of Japanese aerial superiority, was being hunted. The psychological impact was profound. Confidence among Zero pilots eroded. The fearless aggressors of 1941 and 1942 now hesitated, recalculated, second-guessed. When the hunters hesitate, the balance shifts. Meanwhile, American pilots were emboldened. Morale soared for men like Hayes, Mitchell, and Watkins. The P-38 no longer felt like a lumbering machine doomed to lag behind in combat. The aircraft had become a true extension of their instincts, a weapon of precision and speed, almost alive under their hands. Despite the life-saving impact of McKenna's modification, recognition did not follow. In October 1943, an engineering inspector traced discrepancies in cable tension readings to the piano wire tensioners. The report went up the chain of command. Officials debated whether to punish the mechanics or quietly approve the innovation. By November, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea. Tests confirmed what McKenna already knew. The modification worked. It should have been part of the original design. The tensioning system would officially be integrated into the P-38J model by December 1943. Yet McKenna's name never appeared. No medals, no citations, no acknowledgement in engineering reports. History, in its official records, would credit the improvement to design evolution, not the ingenuity of a single sergeant in the sweltering jungles of New Guinea. James McKenna never sought recognition. For him, the faces of the pilots who returned alive were reward enough. Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, every man who lived to fly another mission bore silent testimony to his ingenuity, courage, and quiet defiance of regulations in the name of saving lives. Hayes survived the war, 63 combat missions, 11 kills, returned home to Iowa, married his high school sweetheart, raised 4 children, and spent decades as a crop duster. Each year, on August 17th, he called McKenna to thank him. Mitchell stayed in the Air Force, retired as a colonel in 1963, and shared the story of McKenna's modification with every young maintenance officer under his command, teaching them a lesson often forgotten. Innovation does not always come from engineers or generals. Sometimes it comes from those who touch the machines every day, who see the problem no one else sees and act to save lives. McKenna returned to Long Beach, California, opened his own garage, and worked on engines for 42 years. He rarely spoke of the war. When asked, he said simply, "I was a mechanic, Fixed airplanes, that's all. It wasn't until 1991, nearly 50 years later, that a military historian tracked him down. By then, McKenna was 73, still working with grease-stained hands in his garage. The historian estimated his piano wire modification may have saved 80 to 100 lives. McKenna's response, "I never counted. I just remembered the ones who came back." James McKenna passed away in 2006, aged 88. His obituary mentioned his service as a mechanic, but not the innovation that changed the Pacific Air War. A faded photograph on the wall of his old garage, a young man in coveralls beside a P-38 Lightning. August 1943, New Guinea remains a silent testament. In war, history often remembers generals, aces, and victories. But the truth is sometimes smaller, quieter, yet far more profound. A single mechanic, a tiny piece of piano wire, and the courage to defy regulations saved lives and changed the course of battle. Innovation often comes not from committees, but from those who see a problem, take a risk, and refuse to wait for permission. The story of James McKenna reminds us, heroism is not always on the battlefield. Sometimes it lives in the grease-stained hands of those who make survival possible.